So today is July 10, and this is Jack Colley's Black Book. And today we're going to look at shadow boxing. So the idea of the shadow, it's a Jungian idea that the shadow is your dark side. It's the part of you that you seem to constantly be fighting against. You're constantly trying to correct it. You want to change it. It's the part of you that you're just not happy with. And a lot of times we fight our shadow. And what I want to do today is I want to give you some ideas that might help you manage your shadow, because you may find that fighting your shadow is really not the answer, because you're never going to get rid of your shadow. You're never going to be perfect. You're always going to have things that you're fighting for. I think that either we evolved that way or we were designed that way so that we could continue to improve. We can continue to learn. So it's almost like we have to face our dark side, but I'm going to give you some suggestions that might help you manage it or better learn from it. And some of these might be bizarre. I'm not sure, but let's try it out. So the idea of shadow boxing, though, came from this quote from Richard Rohr that we shared, I think, in the last two broadcasts. One of the great surprises is that humans come to full consciousness, meaning they walk on the water. That's kind of the theme that we have been looking at, precisely by shadow boxing and facing their own contradictions. And I like what Richard Rohr says here, too, making friends with their own mistakes and failings. So let's just take a look at some ideas here that you can consider when learning how to work with your shadow, because there's just this yin yang. There's this idea that we have to coexist with our shadows. It's as if to say we'll never completely alleviate evil from our lives, because it's just always going to be there, if for no other reason than to define good. So that yin-yang approach. So one of the first things I ask my clients whenever I meet with people, during the first session, I'm going to ask them how they're sleeping. This is a great indicator of a person's health, is how they're sleeping. It's something we don't have a lot of control over. I mean, if we wake up, we wake up. We would love to sleep. Sometimes things get in the way. But I want to just talk about sleep for a minute. So first of all, sleep is cleansing. So there is some research and literature that is beginning to indicate that when we sleep, in a way, our bodies kind of kick into hyperdrive. I don't know if that's the right word, but our bodies become more efficient at processing, filtering, and getting rid of toxins. So everything that you collected during the day, just literally and physically and chemically, things that are in our food, things that are in our environment, that get onto our skin, that we've taken in because we have to eat, all of those things have toxins in them. And at night, when we're asleep, our bodies seem to do a better job of getting rid of those toxins and processing them in a way to get them out of our bodies. We've always known that sleep is, we've always known that sleep is restorative. If you get a good night's sleep, you wake up, you're refreshed, particularly if you're not sleeping by drug induction. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. But a good night's sleep, where you wake up and you're refreshed, it is because it's restorative. Your muscles are healing. Your wounds are healing more faster if you sleep. If you're ill, and all of this works for emotional stuff too. So if we think about trauma, if we think about that type of emotional toxin, if you will, that gets into your body, if you get sleep, your body is much more likely to process it effectively by getting sleep. I do want to caution people, and again, I talk to my clients about this. If you are only sleeping via a drug-induced sleep, so that is to say, if I would say if more nights than not, if you're having to take a sleeping pill, or you're having to take a shot of your favorite liquor or whatever to make yourself tired. If you're taking a Benadryl, an antihistamine, or something like that, if you're taking any type of chemical in order to sleep, I want to caution you about that. Now, it may be that a drug-induced sleep is going to be healthier for you than, for example, dealing with something. So if you have had surgery, if you had an accident and a wound is healing, if you experienced a trauma, if you're having a difficult time with a relationship, like a significant relationship in your life, it may be that you work with your doctor and you and your doctor decide that a drug-induced sleep is at least going to be healthier than not sleeping and dealing, and having to think about and process, whatever event happened to you, or, to have to deal with the pain. And that's something that you have to work through with your doctor. So by no means am I saying that prescription medication should not be used. By no means am I saying you need to be overly cautious by having a glass of wine before bed. That's not at all what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that if you are doing this and using these chemicals frequently and it's becoming habitual, where you just find that you can't sleep unless you take the pill, unless you have the drink. If you're doing these things, then chances are that might be a good indicator that you've got some shadow work to do, that there is a reason you're not sleeping at night. I think you've heard the saying, hey, I can sleep at night, which I think is kind of indicative of a person saying, my mind is okay. I know what I'm doing. I can sleep at night. I can deal with life, however you want to interpret it. So, but sleep is really important. Now, one thing that you can do in terms of sleep is, of course, one other thing that interrupts sleep is when we dream. So when we dream or we have nightmares. So this is something you can do as well, especially for shadow work, because I do think that there's something to be said about when you dream and when you have nightmares, that is, in a way, your shadow communicating something to you. And unfortunately, it's just not clear. Sometimes we have to do the dream interpretation thing. So I'm just going to give you some pointers here. When you wake up and you've had a nightmare, or if you've had a dream, but if something wakes you up, take a journal, take a piece of paper, and just write down the elements of the dream. So what really stood out in the dream? Was it a flickering candle? Was it a spider? Was it a monster? Was it something that you couldn't see? Did you feel you were being chased? Did you find yourself in a perfect environment? Was it, put down one of your feelings, but you're really looking at just detailed observations. You're not necessarily writing out the whole dream, word for word, this happened, then this happened, but you're just giving enough elements of the dream that you can remember the dream. Then what you're going to do is the next day, hopefully once you go back to sleep, the next day do a free association. So if a candle keeps showing up in your dream, get a blank piece of paper, write candle at the top, and do a free association. Free association is when you basically sit with a pencil or pen. Every single word, you start out with candle, this element that shows up in your dream, and every word that pops into your head, you just write it down. So everything. So if I were to do a free association right now, I'd write down candle. Then I might write down cat, dog, paw, food, ice cream, cigarette, so on and so forth. And I just did that. I just listed those things. Now, eventually you're going to find that as these lists develop, you'll begin to notice that your brain kind of goes toward things, toward certain themes. And that might help you do some shadow work, is just to kind of reflect on, perhaps what are the common elements of these dreams and what do you associate with these common elements from real life. And then just a few more things here really quickly. If you can't sleep, don't fight it. If you can't sleep, get up. I don't know how healthy it is to just lay in bed staring at the ceiling thinking, oh my gosh, I got to go to sleep. I got to go to sleep. I got to work in the morning, because to me, it's kind of counterproductive to just lay there. and hope you're going to fall asleep. My suggestion would be get up and do something. Get up and meditate. Meditate, just sit in silence. You can do this during the day too if you're doing active shadow work. But the idea is just to listen. Just to listen. What is keeping you up at night? What is interrupting your sleep? You really have to listen to these things. And then a couple things that are a little more unconventional, I guess. But I think that if you really look at it, there might be some wisdom to this. You might want to embrace your shadow. You might want to embrace your dark side. And this might be important because it's kind of the idea of dining with the devil. The idea of dancing with the devil. That's another way that it's phrased. This idea that the more you become friends with your dark side, even to the extent of the more you can accept how much evil your hands are capable of in the right circumstances, the more you can accept that you have a dark side, I think the easier it is to manage it. It gives you a certain amount of awareness. It's being above the water and being aware of the depth that you could go if you allow yourself to sink below the water. So those are some ideas too. The idea of embracing your shadow, the idea of dining with the devil, just things to consider. So that is it for tonight. So namaste, my friends.